Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's presentation, Kākāpō Comeback, Protecting New Zealand's Flightless Night Parrot, is brought to you by NatHab Expedition Leader Sam Kuperus. Sam grew up in Timaru on the eastern Pacific coast of the South Island, swimming at the beaches with scenic views of the Southern Alps. He completed his higher education at the University of Otago in Dunedin, receiving degrees in business management and philosophy, politics, and economics. After a brief spell as a corporate project manager, Sam hit the road and traveled extensively throughout the Pacific, Europe, Southeast Asia, and Central Asia. Along the way, he developed a passion for sustainable tourism and wildlife. 8 years after he left, Sam returned to New Zealand and has guided outdoor tours throughout the country since. He has a passion for photography, particularly wildlife and aurora photography, and enjoys sharing camera tips with travelers on every expedition. In 2022, Sam joined Natural Habitat Adventures as a New Zealand expedition leader, and today we get him right here with us on Daily Dose. Sam, so happy to have you. The show is yours, my friend. Take it away.
Thanks, Rob. You almost know more about me than I do there with that introduction. Greatly appreciated. And this is Barnaby, who's helping me with my presentation. But I did say to Rob earlier, he gets restless about when you finish that, so I might let him go shortly. But thanks for having me. My presentation today, I wanted to talk about the Kākāpō, a night parrot endemic to New Zealand, because this year we are celebrating 30 years of the Kākāpō recovery program. And this year is a big breeding season for these birds. We're hoping to have and have seen already the highest number of chicks being born since the program started. To give you a little bit of context there, the Kākāpō birds down to a population of just 51 animals about 30 years ago. And the population currently is sitting at 243. Every time I open my presentation, I have to check that number is still accurate, is sort of how closely monitored they are. But without further ado, we'll dive in. And I thought I'd just make sure that you get to see Barnaby in case he wasn't here for the start of the presentation. There he is in his natural habitat. So firstly, I want to introduce you to the Kākāpō. So the name Kākā means parrot, and po is night in the Maori language. The Latin name Strigops is ancient Greek, and it means owl-faced. And if you, actually that little photo of a chick is perhaps not doing the owl face justice, but you get a bit of an idea there, and have a look at the faces later on. So owl-faced, and then the second part of the name means soft feather. Owl faces with soft feather. They are quite chonky birds. The heaviest males at breeding time are over 9 pounds. Now, as you can imagine, a bird that weighs 9 pounds is not so good at flying. And in fact, Kākāpō are completely flightless, but they are incredibly agile being that way. And one of the biggest challenges for the Kākāpō rangers is actually capturing the birds when they need them. So when I was over on the Kākāpō Island at the start of this year, or one of the Kākāpō Islands, as a volunteer, they were starting to roll out their artificial insemination program, and they were going to find the females. And when they tracked the females, they find them 30 feet up in a tree. This also became a problem. We introduced, or the Department of Conservation introduced Kākāpō to an island sanctuary in the North Island called Sanctuary Mountain, and the Kākāpō kept escaping from the predator-proof fence. So this is an 8-foot high fence with non-climbing material at the top to keep out mammalian predators, such as stoats, rats, possums. And the Kākāpō were getting over the fence, and it turned out they were climbing up the trees and kind of parachuting themselves down and over the fence. So they are quite clever and quite mischievous. They're also long-lived. We think they live about 60 to 90 years, but we really don't know. The degradation in their population has happened at a time before we were keeping a close eye on these birds, but we think about 80 to 90 would be their maximum lifespan, which parrots are known for living a long time, but that's still a long time even by parrot standards. They have lots of fun personalities and traits, and they are lek breeders. So a lek breeder means that the male does a show or a performance to attract the females. And in the case of the Kākāpō, they climb up to the top of hills, they dig a little bowl in the ground, and then the males sit in that bowl and they boom, sort of a very deep guttural noise. I'll see if I can play one for you later on, but it's almost too deep a sound for cameras and phones to pick up. And that booming noise hopefully attracts the female, who walk to the top of the hill to find the Kākāpō. They like the look of each other. With some luck, you get baby Kākāpō. And when those males are doing their booming, they are incredibly motivated. So they are getting as fat as they can pre-breeding, and then they'll literally starve themselves trying to attract a female. The only time they'll leave their bowl and stop booming is when they go down to look for food. Population about 234 adult birds at the moment, and I'll tell you more about the chicks that have been born this year later on. The chicks don't get added to the official population until they're 150 days old. They formerly were very docile and very populous around the country, and Richard Henry, a conservationist that we'll learn more about later on, noted you could shake a tree and they fell out like apples. But yeah, the Kākāpō are also, they are big learners, and they have to learn how to be Kākāpō. They fall out of trees, they get washed in rivers, they stand out in the rain when they're chicks, and so it's really important to have them being raised by a parent bird so that they pick up all of the things they need to know. They are part of a little family of parrots in New Zealand. We have 3 parrots, the kia, the kaka, and the Kākāpō. And I have to mention that because yesterday, or the day before, Natural Habitat posted a photo of a kia, and there was a comment in there that someone thought it was a Kākāpō. So it's very timely to have our presentation. But they're all of the same family tree. And there was one other member of this family called Squawkzilla, or Heracles inexpectus. Heracles being a great Greek demigod, and inexpectus, it was a bit of a surprise to find this bird. We found it in an old prehistoric lake that had dried up, alongside things like crocodiles, flamingos, and even a small mammal. Now, I say even a small mammal because if you've been on any of our trips or watched any of my other presentations, you'll know that in New Zealand there are no native land mammals other than our bat species. So that there might have been something running around is a little bit of a curiosity. We wonder sort of how that's got to New Zealand and what impact it would have had on the ecology, because New Zealand separated from Gondwana land prior to the evolution of mammals. But I want to show you a bit more about Squawkzilla, this giant parrot, because you can see there in the comments on the slide, it was 3 feet tall, weighed over 15 pounds, lived quite some time ago. And it's a product of being on an island that it perhaps became so big. And on New Zealand, we have lots of large things. We had a giant flightless bird called the moa, which stood over 8 feet tall. We had a giant bird of prey, Haast's eagle, that had about a 14-foot wingspan and could fly. So I want to show you, if I can, this little video introducing Squawkzilla, the giant parrot. You're done, Barnaby. Good boy.
Squawkzilla is a parrot, but truly gigantic. Squawkzilla is a parrot that would have been walking around 16 million years ago. It would have stood nearly a metre tall and weighed up to 25 kilograms, and it would have been possibly even carnivorous. It's a parrot related to the Kākāpō, but truly gigantic. Squawkzilla is one of the famous finds from the St. Bathans fossil site over the last 20 odd years. This exhibit highlights many of the fossils that we've collected at this particular site.
So this is the lower leg bone of Squawkzilla, the giant parrot, which will be going on display in the Squawkzilla exhibition space. It is mostly complete, so it will be probably about that long from the table up. A pretty big parrot.
We'll compare the fossils to the taxidermied remains of closely related species such as the kiwi. At the St. Bathans fossil site, we have species that most wouldn't expect, such as crocodiles, tuatara, bats, a giant species of turtle which probably had horns, and about 40 different species of bird in total, many of which are quite different to those that you see today.
These birds are being prepared for the Squawkzilla exhibit in the new museum. The conservation team is playing a part in making the objects look as good as they can be for when everyone's welcome back into the new museum. With the new museum, we've got much more exhibition space, which means there's the opportunity to bring things to light that people have never seen before.
This exhibit will give you a real insight into what New Zealand might have been like 16 million years ago.
So thanks to Canterbury Museum for that little video, and the museum has been closed for the last couple of years when we've visited. Oh, I don't know what that video is. Last couple of years they've been renovating it, as they sort of said in the video there, and the end of our NetHab tours is in Christchurch. So hopefully once those renovations are completed, if you're coming over to see us in New Zealand, you might get a chance to pop into the museum and see that exhibit and get an idea for how big that parrot is. You might also get a chance to see this beautiful blue green plumage on the outside of its wings, and underneath its wings, beautiful bright orange color. They're very, very intelligent. They seem to be as intelligent as a 4-year-old child, and we do often see those on our tours. And we won't see Kākāpō, sadly. They are only on offshore islands, but we might see the other parrot there, the Kākā, particularly on Australia Island. Kākāpō life cycle. And thanks to Sarah May Little, who's one of the DOC, Department of Conservation Rangers, who does these fabulous cartoons and shares them on her Instagram, and they get shared on the Kākāpō Recovery website, and they're just fantastic. But Kākāpō, 30-day incubation in the egg. After that, about 10 weeks before they start venturing around the place, and you start having to learn to be Kākāpō, as I said. After 150 days, they are considered fledged. They'll start to leave the nest, and they can be counted as adult birds. They do have a fairly high rate of mortality, particularly infertility and then early stages of embryo development. So we don't count them till they're 150 days old, which this year, the first Kākāpō chick was born on the 14th of February, on Valentine's Day. So sort of August, September, they'll start to be added to the official population. And we previously thought that birds started to breed at 5 years old. And that is more about the masting of the remu trees, which I'll teach you about in a little minute. But this year, we had 4-year-old birds starting to breed. So that's really exciting for helping the population to recover. They can have up to 5 eggs in clutch, and they can double clutch. It's lost. If they were to try and raise 5 chicks, generally they would struggle to look after them all. 2 seems to be about the maximum we would want with a female, especially at the moment where they're struggling so much. But yeah, potentially up to 5 birds. And I've got a little video there about learning to be a Kākāpō. Let me share that one for you, because this is courtesy of the Dunedin Wildlife Hospital, who raise Kākāpō chicks in their, or have had a Kākāpō chick in their care, I should say. And this poor little bird here, Tia A3, has getting to grips with being alive and quite how her body works. So this particular bird is being raised there because it wasn't doing so well in the wild. It had a big infection all over it. It was brought to the Dunedin Wildlife Hospital with another bird that was further underweight than they would expect, and that other bird was able to be taken back and put back on a nest with a parent. But Tia is remaining with the Wildlife Hospital for the time being, just to make sure things are okay. You can see she's still got those big wings, although they're not much use for flying. And now she's also got an apple, which will be a sort of great comfort to her. Oh, that's meant to be off. That hasn't worked. So fun. And the name there, so Tia A3 for this bird. Tia is her mother, and this is A3, so this is the third egg. So she'll lay an egg every sort of 2 to 3 days while she's having that clutch. Oh, there's a second Kākāpō in there still. Tell a lie, there's 2 birds in the hospital when they recorded this video. How very fun. And where do the Kākāpō live? They are currently on 3 offshore predator-free islands. Oahu Island, or Codfish Island, is down off the coast of Stewart Island, and this is the island I was lucky to visit earlier in the year. Pukenui and Te Kākahu, also down in the national parks. And there is another little reserve up in the North Island Sanctuary Mountain, which is a fenced sanctuary on the North Island of New Zealand. They introduced 10 Kākāpō there in 2023, but as I mentioned, they kept escaping. So we're down to 3 males being left in that sanctuary. The others have been removed and put back onto the predator-free islands where they can't get themselves into any mischief. For experiments like that, or the Department of Conservation, put males that don't have particularly interesting genetics, or maybe they're infertile birds. So there's a bit less risk if something goes wrong to losing a species that perhaps might be, or losing a bird, sorry, that might be more genetically valuable. And also on my slide there, I've got a picture of the fridge door, and you'll see at the top of the fridge door are the 3 islands, Whenua, Pukenui, and Te Kākahu. And underneath each of those are the names of the female birds that are on each of those islands. And then next to their names, if they've got a tick on the left, that means that the technology that they wear on their backs, the transmitters and the trackers, detected that they've mated. And you can see some of them have mated a couple of times, and that's really good for Kākāpō because it improves their fertility. And then on the other side, you've got little pictures of circles and dashes and dots and crosses. And this is tracking the breeding season. And this particular fridge photo is nearly at the end of the breeding season. And so it's quite full. You can see Alice at the top she laid 4 eggs and all 4 were infertile. Whereas Bella, the 4th one down there, 3 eggs. They candled those eggs and all 3 were fertile. All 3 hatched, but one of them died shortly after. And you can also see Bella was the artificial insemination, is what the little needle symbol is there. And so every week they update the fridge door, and this is in the hut that the rangers live on Whenua Island. So it's a little bit of fun. And I was actually there on the island when they were drawing the fridge for the first day of the season and writing all the names. And you might be able to see in the bottom corner of the photo, there's some bird names on the freezer. This is last breeding season's freezer, and they couldn't quite bring themselves to rub off the success of the previous year, so they had to move up to the fridge, and obviously they need all that real estate now. And then down the bottom, the 4-year-old birds and birds that they've lost the tracking of. We didn't think 4-year-olds would be able to breed or hadn't seen it happen before, so it was really exciting this year to see those young females having chicks, or eggs and chicks, for the first time. What's really important for the Kākāpō to breed is this tree called Rimu tree. Now, the Rimu tree is a big old native tree in New Zealand. The scientific name means like a teardrop, like cypress, and maybe because the leaves kind of weep and hang down from the tree. And the Maori name Rimu is also used for seaweed. So again, perhaps a reference to the hanging, dragging, sweeping leaves of this tree. Very old living, 600 to 800 years. It's a podocarp, so it's got the fruit on the end of the foot, and you can see in the photo those red fruits there. The first beer in New Zealand was made by Captain Cook from the tips in these leaves. Now, importantly, this tree masts every 2 to 4 years. The mast is where it produces maybe 10 times or more the amount of fruit to a normal season. Now, the reason that trees do this is if you continually produce the same amount of fruit, then the population of birds will increase to rely on that amount of fruit, and you'll never get to have any seedlings. So they do a normal level of seed most years, and every, say, probably 2 to 5 years, it'll have a big mast produce a huge amount of fruit, and then some of that the birds won't be able to eat. It can go into the ground and hopefully produce new trees. Now, the Kākāpō know this is how it works, and so they only breed when this tree masts. This is the food that they like to feed to their chicks, and so their breeding cycles are dependent on this tree's life cycle. And if the fruit doesn't ripen, many of the parents won't feed unripe berries to their chicks, and so it leads to starvation, which is a reason that we need to manage this species as it's recovering. And they can't be encouraged to breed in any other way. So one of the things that is done is we do, or the Department of Conservation and the volunteers, feed the birds supplementary food. And that can help get them into good condition, and it can encourage them more enthusiastically to breed, but it can't trigger a breeding season. They are reliant on this particular tree to fruit and have its mast. Down the bottom there, a chick will eat about 5,000 fruit a night. So they need a large number of these things, and that presents little challenges. And I have a little introduction to it. Oh, no, I don't. From Andrew Digby, who's one of the rangers on with the program, and far more of an expert than I am to talk about the Rimu tree.
So we're standing underneath a large Rimu tree, and the Rimu tree is the fuel for a Kākāpō breeding season. Every 2 to 4 years, it produces a massive crop of these tiny little fruits, which is what the Kākāpō need to breed, and other species as well, like the Kākāiki and the Kākā also do really well in those years. And what those birds need are these little tiny fruits which develop on the little tips of the Rimu. And they'll need up to around about 1/2 kilo of these fruits per chick. And so these fruits weigh about 1/10 of a gram, so that's about 5,000 fruits per chick per night. And so these fruits take a long time to develop. They take about a year, and by the springtime, around about September, October, the Kākāpō will notice that there's lots of fruits on these trees, on the Rimu tree, and so they'll know it's time to breed. They will mate, lay eggs. By the time the chicks hatch, around about February, the fruits will be starting to ripen and developing. And what will happen is the fruits will start off with green, and then they'll develop these little red fleshy bits and grow in size, and that's that red fruit, that ripe fruit, which the Kākāpō really need to be able to feed their chicks. The problem on Whenua here is that the fruit often doesn't ripen. That means naturally the Kākāpō chicks would starve, and that's why we have to step in with supplementary feeding. But on the other Kākāpō islands out in Fiordland, like Pukenui, Anchor, and Te Kākahu, Chalky, The rimu fruit is ripening this year. There's lots and lots of ripe fruit, and so that's perfect conditions for Kākāpō to be able to raise lots of young.
Hopefully that's better than listening to me explain it. So the rimu tree, really, really important. But so kind of there's a little bit of an obvious question. Why have you got these birds? They've all been translocated onto these predator-free islands to try and help their survival. So why put them on an island down in the south where the fruit doesn't ripen? And it's simply that's the safest place we've got for them. They need to be absolutely away from rats, stoats. Stoats are a type of, I think, ermine or mustelid. And in the presence of these, their population gets absolutely decimated, unfortunately. So they've been moved to these offshore islands. Whenua Hou has rimu trees, as Andrew said, but often it doesn't fully ripen for the birds. So the population of these things, as I said, they used to fall out of trees like apples. Unfortunately, after humans have arrived, they were used as a food source. We introduced mammals into New Zealand, and we introduced other birds that competed for food with them also. Mammals like cats, as well as the ermine and the possums, will eat the eggs, they'll eat the chicks, they'll eat the fully grown adults. Obviously, a loss of habitat as humans have cleared land for farming, and we did a lot of that by burning through large patches of forest. There's a couple of diseases that they are particularly susceptible, although perhaps these are more modern. One is aspergillosis. The one is cloatis. We'll talk about more of those later. Competition for food from other birds. Infertility is a big problem, particularly as we're trying to increase the population, and they've got a bit of a shortage of genetics. And population density. We don't know how densely these birds should live. You need a particularly dense population in order that the females can find some males to breed with in the season, but you don't want it too dense, otherwise we'll fight and kill each other for territory. So we went from thousands, tens of thousands, maybe 50 to 100,000 of these birds. By 1995, there's just 50 birds left. And the aspergillosis is a fungus that attacks the lungs and the ear sacs of the bird, particularly during the breeding season when they're in a nest under the ground in a more humid environment. The cloatis or crusty bum is a bacterial inflammation that affects their digestive and reproductive tracts and prevents them from being able to breed. So those are a couple of things that are constantly being monitored for. And the researchers have also realized there's an 80% loss of historical parasitic diversity in their bodies since pre-human arrival. So they're potentially losing that natural immunity that they would have had now that we're around. Where do I need to click? And well, how have we got them here? The first guy who realized the problem that these things were having was a conservationist by the name of Richard Henry. He was seeing the impact that the stoats were having. He was seeing the impact on their population. They were getting harder and harder to find, so much so that he tried to kill himself. He actually fired a revolver and shot himself in the head, and it didn't kill him. He tried another shot, and the gun misfired and didn't shoot. That was in 1893. Fortunately for us, he survived that, and in 1894, he was appointed the caretaker of our first reserve island, Resolution Island, out in the Fiordland National Park. He started to translocate birds there, particularly Kākāpō and kiwi, taking almost 600 birds across to the island. Unfortunately, after doing all that work, a boat that came past and someone spotted and said, "Oh, you've got a stoat or a ferret on your island chasing your birds." He didn't believe them, but surely enough, I think in 1906, he caught a stoat on the island, and the population by then had been decimated on that island. He was deeply depressed and frustrated. He couldn't bring himself to reintroduce and redo the work and essentially condemn those birds to again. So he had to leave the island, and he was taken. He lived on Kapiti Island up in the North Island, where he became the manager of that island. Sadly, when he died, very unrecognized, and died of senility and heart disease, they said. And he also said Kākāpō were incredibly fragile. He said the easiest thing in the world to exterminate a few wild dogs and clear the country in a decade. He wasn't a scientist, and so he also got very frustrated that no one would listen to what he was saying and what he was observing about these birds and writing about them, because he wasn't doing it in the proper scientific manner of the time. One of the 3 birds that was found on the South Island of New Zealand was named Richard Henry. It was the only fertile bird found on the South Island. The rest of the 50 birds that we had in the 1990s came off Stewart Island, and so they were very genetically closely related. Richard Henry had 3 chicks, Sinbad, Gulliver, and Kuya, and now there are 26 out of the 243 birds have Fiordland genetics, thanks to the Kākāpō Richard Henry. So in life and in death, Richard Henry has, life and in reincarnation, Richard Henry has had an impact on the Kākāpō population. This is one of the big birds that I spotted while I was on the island. This is a big male Kākāpō, a bit over, he is about 9 pounds at the moment at the start of the breeding season. But I've got a couple of quotes here from another conservationist, Don Merton, about Richard Henry. Henry's writings, more than any other, have been indispensable in our work. Henry was undoubtedly a remarkable and talented field naturalist. His extraordinarily accurate observations and records have given us insights into the biology of Pio, Kākāpō, and Kiwi. We knew from Richard Henry's experience that some of the birds were very stubborn and that they sometimes starved themselves. Henry recognized that even if they did not eat, they would drink. So we gave them honey water, which they just loved, and then we would fortify the honey drink with dried milk formula and a vitamin and mineral mix. And this is how they were able to translocate those birds to predator-free islands in the 1990s. Henry demonstrated that birds could be moved from place to place and that they could establish themselves successfully in new territories. We got a fair idea from Henry what would work and what would not, and that became the platform for what we did with the Wildlife Service while moving critically endangered species. And those quotes come from our second conservation hero, which is Don Merton. Now, Don Merton is perhaps our most famous recent conservationist. He recognized the efforts and the knowledge that Richard Henry had created, and he's been pivotal in saving many, many species, and he saved those by translocation. And the first time translocation was successfully used on birds was with the South Island saddleback. The population of that bird got down to just 23 individuals, again because of predation. And that population is now up to, I think, about 1,500 animals, thanks to Don Merton and his team. He also helped save the black robin. That population was down to just 6 or 7 birds and only 1 female. North Island saddleback. And he pioneered this close management of species. And when he was young, him and his brother orphaned a goldfinch with his mother's or his grandmother's canary. And so he had this innate understanding from childhood about how birds could be raised in different ways. So he led the team that found the Kākāpō on Stewart Island and in the Field National Park. Took them onto those predator-free islands. He's worked on several projects to eradicate rats, cats, rabbits from different islands in New Zealand and abroad, and he's helped save a lot of other species as well. Things like in Australia, he worked with the noisy scrub bird, the Mauritius parakeet, Abbott's booby in Australia, and the magpie robin in the Seychelles. So not just in New Zealand. Where's my mouse? There it is. This is Sinbad getting a health check on Whenua Island when I was there. So Sinbad is one of the offspring of Richard Henry, the Kākāpō, and Sinbad was one of the last Kākāpō that was hand-reared. Now, Kākāpō are incredibly prone to imprinting, which means if a human raises them, they get attracted to humans and want to spend time with them, and they haven't learned the skills on how to be Kākāpō. And we have discovered as well that the males are less fertile, or they have less offspring naturally if they're hand-reared. And so one of the key things with conservation now is if you have to hand-rear some birds, if we've got too many chicks for the females on the nest, then we want to hand-rear females as opposed to males. The males need to learn somehow from the mothers how to breed. But Sinbad's story, so Sinbad, as I said, a descendant of Richard Henry and Flossie, and he was the youngest of 3 chicks for Flossie, and he was underweight and suffering from respiratory problems, so he was taken away and transported away for additional help. On his way, he was in a flight and he started to get into respiratory distress. So the air hostess on the airplane actually got the oxygen system that they have for humans. They had to adjust that and refit the masks so that it would go in Sinbad's head. And that kept him going until they landed the plane. He spent a night in the hotel in Christchurch and eventually was taken to a vet to be able to be raised. And Sinbad survived that ordeal. He's now fathered 4 birds. As I said, males are not very good at doing the deed, and so his offspring were all done via artificial insemination. And you'd probably notice as well, there's lots of names for these birds, and when there's such a small population, it's wonderful to hear the stories from the rangers talking about individual birds. And if you have someone like Daryl Eason, who's been working with these birds for something like 40 years, and it's wonderful listening to his stories because he knows the ancestors, he knows the whakapapa or the genealogy of these birds and their descendants and who they've mated with, and has all these wonderful stories about them. And the best way to hear more of those stories is another former Kākāpō ranger, Alison Ballance, who's done a podcast, Kākāpō Diaries. So have a look on that to hear some more of their stories. She's also written a book about them with some of that genealogy in there. Now, the third hero in this story is a guy by the name of Douglas Adams. Now, Douglas Adams, some of you will be familiar with that name. He, of course, wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And in 1989 and 1990, he went out with Mark Carwadine, who was an ecologist or a scientist, or is, I should say, a scientist. And they went around the world filming or recording audio for a series for the BBC called Last Chance to See. And they went and they saw Kākāpō, they saw the aye-ayes, they saw Komodo dragons, gorillas, rhinoceros. You can read the list there. And then they made a radio series, and then they wrote a book about it. And then Stephen Fry in 2009, because Douglas Adams died very young, 53 years old, and Stephen Fry decided to go around and revisit these species and see how they were going as part of a little TV series by the same name. So he came down to New Zealand, he came down to Whenua Island, and he met another bird called Sirocco. And Sirocco Sirocco was the first bird to be hand-reared, and so he is heavily imprinted. Let me show you a video of that encounter, and my apologies if you've seen this before, because last time I spoke to you, someone did ask if I had photos of Kākāpō, and I suggested I did not, and go and watch this video. But here you go, bear with me.
It ought to be impossible to describe a creature as looking old-fashioned, but that's exactly how Sirocco looks, with his big sideburns and his Victorian gentleman's face.
Oh, yeah. Huge. It's actually nice just seeing him wandering around in the forest undergrowth.
You can see he's got very good camouflage.
He has. That colour is
So, you know, evolution hasn't entirely rendered him useless.
Hello. You're going to look in the lens.
A typical male, Sirocco is clearly only interested in one thing.
Oh, look at that. Ow. God, he's got sharp claws.
He's getting a bit frisky.
Ow. Ow.
Do you think it is he's actually attempting a sort of mating ritual? He is. Oh, you must. You are being shagged.
Or not. Ow. God, it's sharp.
Look, he's so happy. Sorry. One of the funniest things I've ever seen. You are being shagged by a rare parrot. He thinks you are. Ow. He's really going for it. Wow, you've chosen him? Is it actually, you were in pain, aren't you?
That's right.
Oh, his neck is covered.
Am I? He's fine, but it's really sharp.
Did that
claws.
hurt?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got blood there and blood there and blood there. We should patch you up, to be honest, because it's not good. But
Well,
I want you to call the chick. When you have the chick, I want you to call it Stephen for me. Would you do that?
I'm not sure how to
Little
take that.
egg will come out of your mouth. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the television first. You've seen Mark Carwardine, who has devoted his life to conserving animals, actually taking an active part in the conservation and breeding of a whole new generation, of a whole new species, Homo Kākāpens. He's going to give birth to a little Kākāpō. We're very proud of you.
Do you want to have a go?
I think I'll pass, actually.
So a very fascinating visit there for Stephen Fry and Mark Cowan. And the reason that this was so good in Kākāpō conservation is it kind of gave a bit of a wake-up call that actually we need to look after these things and be thinking about how they're going. And when I look at this list of species here, thankfully some of them are doing okay. The the Komodo dragon, mountain gorillas. I think the rhinoceros is not doing so well. I think the river dolphin is now extinct or data insufficient at best. But for us, it was a little bit of a, hey, people are coming to see this thing and we might lose them. We'd better be careful. Sirocco, the parrot that was in that video, he was sick as a young bird and again had to be taken away from his mother, respiratory illness and raised by the conservationists. And because of that process, as we were still learning about how it works, he became very imprinted. And he wouldn't boom, he wouldn't try and mate with other birds. He tries to mate only with humans. As you saw, and this led to a very interesting piece of Kākāpō history in New Zealand. The rangers thought, well, hold on, we need this genetic material that he could potentially produce. So they went and got a piece of protective rugby headgear, and they got some silicone muffin cups, glued that onto the headgear, and then they went out to find Sirocco and let him do his thing. Sadly, it turned out that he was infertile. So it was all in vain. And the Kākāpō ranger, I suppose, that went out and had that experience, Barnaby, it's not the role you're meant to make in this video. They went out, found this Kākāpō, let it breed with the back of the head, but he was infertile, so it was in vain. And that little piece of conservation history, the headgear with the muffin cups on it, is now on display in our National Museum in Wellington in Te Papa. The fourth hero of the Kākāpō program, excuse me, I'm just going to let this dog out, is the conservation team, the Kākāpō recovery team, who over this part of the year lived down on the Kākāpō island. Come on, keep going outside. Lived down on the island and managed this population to try and bring them back up to where they should be. There's it starts off with 3 in the low season, and this time of year, there's probably about 20 people down there. Contributing with things like monitoring the technology, supplementary feeding, or helping the volunteers to do the supplementary feeding, conducting AI, the artificial insemination, learning more about the birds and their behavior. when the chicks when the eggs are laid, they're candling the eggs to see if they're fertile. They're moving them around from different nests to make sure that they're spreading the load across different parents. And once the chicks are born, they testing them for gender and genetics, and then prioritizing their support and recovery to help that population grow as diversely and as quickly as we can. Things like smart eggs. So when they take on Whenuaho Island, they take all of the eggs off the nests and they will incubate them in a specially built incubation room, and then put a smart egg under the female to keep her on the nest. That egg moves a little bit, it cheats, so the mother is encouraged to stay on the egg. Meanwhile, they hatch the chick and then put it back under the mother just as it's coming out of the shell. The reason we have to do that, or the team does that, I should say, on Whenuaho, is because there's a lot of seabirds on that island. Things like petrels, who also nest in little burrows and will try and share a burrow with the Kākāpō, and in the ensuing fight or relationship, often the eggs collateral damage. So we can increase the chances of survival by just doing that hands-on management there as well. Also, disease management. Getting birds to the wildlife hospital. We met the bird already that had been to the wildlife hospital. They had a vet down on the island this year who actually had to do CPR on a bird that had just been born about a week earlier, and they managed to keep that bird alive. They found another one that had a gash in its neck from presumably from a fight with a petrel that had come into the nest, and the bird had been scraped across, and they were able to stitch that up and save the bird as well. So everything they're doing, trying to increase the population. And Ranger Theo here in the photo, and Theo had just been explaining how we were going to go and look for 2 birds to give them health checks and check their harnesses, and we were going to go and look for a second bird first, because this bird, Sinbad, might not leave us alone once he had found us. And just as he finished saying that, Sinbad ran between his legs and was getting ready to climb up and perhaps be a little bit like Sirocco was that we saw in the video earlier. Thankfully, Theo managed to catch him on much to Sinbad's surprise. And we were able to do the health check on him then and there, or the team was able to do the health check. One of the other interesting quotes from an article in the NZ Geo magazine recently, Richard Henry, when he was doing his conservation, he assumed the stoats would not reinvade the island, and this was in an interview saying, well, isn't this all in vain? You know, you're trying to save these birds, and if you get an invasion of these predators, well, Henry assumed the stoats would not invade. We are assuming they will. So they're running trap lines. We're trying to get the population as big as possible, as soon as possible. The islands that we're working on are nice and remote, but there's always a risk that rats or possums or stoats may get across to where these populations are living. Click, click. We've learned a lot through these processes. Females are more likely to have fertile eggs if they mate repeatedly. They're more fertile again if they mate with different males. So the AI is really important there. The AI can increase their fertility, but also it means they can try to create better genetic matches. So birds will mate with their cousins and things like this, which won't increase the diversity. Whereas if we can add in some genetics from a bird from Fiordland as opposed to Stewart Island, hopefully we can create that greater diversity and a healthier, stronger population earlier. We've learned that we don't want to hand rear the birds as much as possible. We want to have as many females as possible. One of the challenges with that is we want the birds to be big and healthy at the start of the breeding season, so that they are encouraged to breed, so that they are able to survive the breeding process, booming and the mating and the raising the chicks, because the female sits on the nest for a lot of the time, especially while the eggs are there. She's on there. She might leave it only 1 or 2 hours a day to feed. But you don't want the females in particular to be too heavy. The bigger the female, the more chance you have of a male offspring. And one of the other little challenges. Now, when we're talking about the genetics, there is a team, particularly down at the University of Otago, who have, in conjunction with other groups, sequenced the entire population of the Kākāpō birds. And this was the first species in the world that the entire population was sequenced. And that's really important because one of the challenges, 40% of eggs are infertile, 20% die as early embryos, and we think this is due to inbreeding. So if we can use artificial insemination to change the genetics going into these new chicks, hopefully we can increase the diversity, and then we can prioritize care. So all of the chicks are given a rating based on who parents are to determine the amount of attention those chicks get. A really high level, really valuable chick might get checked every day or every second day. A lower value bird sounds crass, but it's the economics and realities as the population gets bigger. A lower value bird might only get checked on once a week or something like that. One of the other things that we've been able to do with the genomics team was there was an outbreak of aspergillosis in 2019. It affected a lot of these birds. I think it killed 20 adult birds. The team genetically mapped that aspergillosis and discovered that it was all coming from one strain. And normally there's lots of strains of this around that we have just in our environment naturally, but it was one particular strain causing the problem. And so they deduced that this is probably coming from humans bringing it in because it was just found on these 2 islands. And so that led to changes in process, making sure things are super sanitary before you go onto the islands, before you go and feed the birds and so forth in order to help their survival. Other technology you might be able to see on the back of the Kākāpō in the photo there, Oraka. There's a little GPS monitor. There's an aerial running down its back. They can then track that bird, and it can also be used to activate the food hopper when it goes over looking for food, which means you can target the birds you're trying to feed, which works most of the time, except some of those big birds like Sinbad have learned to shake the hoppers and shake the food out and get extra food. And if you don't feed those big birds, they get grumpy and pull things out of the ground and throw their water bottles around the place. So they are a little bit like toddlers as well. But with a good food, you increase the number of eggs in a clutch. And as I said, they can have up to 5 eggs if they're healthy like that and strong. So it's a big effort. There's a lot of people involved, $1 million a year, over 15 million has been spent on this program. It's countless hours of the rangers and of course volunteers coming out to do the feed out. They run 3 volunteers feeding out and a volunteer cook on the island through the breeding season. You know, the rangers' effort obviously is reflected in some of that funding spend. When I was on the island, the head of the site was saying, right team, you know, this month we're doing 8 hours a day. Once we get into the eggs starting to hatch, we'll do 10 hours a day and then 12 hours a day, etc., as we get busier. And I never once saw a ranger on that island work 8 hours a day. You know, they are incredibly passionate and involved with that project. And, you know, whether it was actually, you know, Theo, we saw in the photo earlier, every time you get up for breakfast, he's already on his computer writing up his research and his master's on albatross, and the others are out checking on what the Kākāpō have been up to overnight. So, you know, there's several more hours a day of work being done that's not being accounted for by those passionate people involved in the project. So is it working? What's the effect that it's having? Here we go. Here's the big reveal. This is a graph of the population of Kākāpō over the last, 50 years. So you can see we had a very steep decline in the population in the 1990s after the Kākāpō recovery program started, after Stephen Fry and Mark came here and took those videos, and we realized that we had to really put some effort into recovering these things. You can see that sort of light gray color where the birds were being taken to offshore islands. And we can see the population stepping up every 4 or 5 years, with the mast year of the Rimu tree causing those big jumps in population. You can see in 2019 as well, where it drops off with the aspergillosis after the breeding there. So it is working. The population today is up to about 243 birds. We currently have 106 chicks were born this year, which is just phenomenal. There are 13 mortalities to date, so we have about 93 chicks alive. So by the end of this year, the population could be 327 birds. So back of the envelope, what's that? About a 40% increase in population. Have I got that right? A significant increase in the population. Following on from this big mast year and lots of intervention on Whenua Island. What are we seeing? We've got these 4-year-old mums. We're getting higher fertility. We're getting greater diversity in the genetics. They've recovered some of the lost birds who had lost their tracking harnesses. We're seeing lots of success at the birds raising their own chicks. We've got less illness, less of both of those diseases, as well as increasing knowledge about my time. I got to go down and visit Whenua for 2 weeks as a volunteer. So I was feeding, putting food into those feeding hoppers that you saw on the video earlier. It was awesome to meet the rangers and understand more about what they do and see their passion and feed off their passion. We had a big, exciting mission to try and find as many orchids while we were out doing our job. Feeding the birds. The rangers were really excited about orchids and they were flowering at that time of year. There was lots of other cool wildlife on the island. On my first day, we were walking through the forest and I said, "Oh, stop, stop. I can hear mohua or yellowheads." And the ranger down there, "Come on, they're everywhere." This is a bird that there's 3,000 of left in the world, and down on this predator-free island, they're doing so well that the rangers almost take them for granted in the scheme of things because they're doing so well. We also saw lovely big sea lions there coming up on the beach next to the ranger hut. There was variable oyster catchers raising their chicks on the island while I was there as well. Yellow-eyed penguins, the rarest penguin species in the world, was down there as well. And interestingly, when you go down to these Kākāpō Islands as part of being a volunteer there, they do say, look, there is a great chance you'll never see a bird while you're there. You need to understand this. We need other people to understand this if they're applying to come and volunteer with us. And I was listening to a podcast and they were interviewing someone from Wellington Zoo. And they had recently had someone come over from Nepal who had been working 30 years with snow leopards. And they'd never seen a snow leopard in their life, and they've been working for 30 years on the conservation of the species. And the first time they saw them was when they came to Wellington Zoo and saw them there. So I went down knowing that for my 2 weeks, there was a good chance I wouldn't see these birds. And for me to cope with 2 weeks of not seeing a Kākāpō, well, when someone's gone 30 years without seeing one, you can do that. But fortunately, I was able to go out with the rangers and when they were doing a couple of those health checks and see the birds. And then on my last day doing the feed out run as a volunteer, I did get to see Sinbad booming on his bowl. And of course, it was the one day that I didn't have my camera to see it. A couple of little photos there from my volunteering time. That's the feed out station. There's a setup. Oh, I'm going to click up there so you can see it. That's the feed out station. You've got the little scales at the bottom there to weigh the bird as it feeds. The smart tracking system there, letting the right bird in, and then reporting back information that the bird's been, that the hopper's been opened, and so forth, reporting that back to the rangers, and also reporting any other birds that have come over to the station and not been allowed any food in case they need food. We were feeding them a mixed pellet that's designed for parrots, and supplementing with some flaxseed oil, as you can see on the bottle. Supplement for horses and for Kākāpō. And I'll just show this last slide here of how you can be involved and then open it up for questions. And There you go. So they did do a live nest camera this year. You could watch Rakiura, one of the Kākāpō mothers, sitting on her nest, and she raised 2 chicks on that nest. Sadly, that nest camera has finished as those birds are starting to spend more time outside the nest, but also because it was solar powered and we're coming into winter, and so there's not enough daylight to keep it all going. Absolutely check out the Kākāpō Recovery Facebook and Instagram pages. And not only are there amazing little videos and photos of Kākāpō and little excerpts from the rangers teaching more about those birds, but there's also more of Sarah's wonderful cartoons on there. As mentioned earlier, they did a podcast series every couple of weeks with Alison Balance, who's a former Kākāpō ranger, telling the stories of the birds and telling the story of this fantastic breeding season. And give that a listen from the start to hear the progress. It's fantastic. Oh, I've got the nest cam on there twice. The nest cam is finished, as I said, but we do have another nest camera in New Zealand. Of course, there's a Royal Albatross camera. So you could check out the Royal Albatross, or there are highlights from that nest camera that you can watch online. Of course, always love donations towards the project. It is entirely donation and sponsorship run, the Kākāpō Recovery Program. Check out Sarah May Little's stuff as well on her website, on her Instagram. She doesn't often sell things with her images on, but she does every now and again, and it's just fabulous to see her cartoons about all different species as well. I went down there as a volunteer, and they took 50 volunteers this year for this season out of many applicants. My particular role is very, very physical, but you never know. On the Department of Conservation website, there are other volunteering options with other species or in other locations. There might just be something in there that works for you, and you might be able to time that and combine it with a visit to come around New Zealand with us as well. You never know your luck. So that is my slides. Actually, I've got a little video of Kākāpō, hopefully a little video of Sinbad booming on his nest. I'll just see if I can play that while Rob, if you've got some questions that have come through, more than happy to have a crack at those. You can hear this deep booming.
Wow, that's amazing. All right,
Isn't
Sam,
that cool?
It really is. So, folks, if you do have questions, please feel free to submit them via the question field in your control panel. Let's dive into some that we do have. So, will a male breed with more than one female in a season?
Yes, more than happy to. Males will also try and breed with seabirds, and as you saw with humans as well. So during that period, they are very reproduction process focused. They'll sit up on top of the hill in their bowl, and they make little tracks in the dirt going up to the bowl as well. Actually, here we go. Oh, no, I haven't got a photo of a bowl there, but they make little tracks in the dirt there to lead the females up to it. And anyone that comes nearby, they are very keen.
Do they have hollow bones like birds, even though they're flightless?
They are, I believe, hollow bones. Yeah, so this is a relatively recent migration. They've still got those great big wings, and they still kind of float down from the trees if they fall or jump out of the trees. So I know where this question's come from. Famously, our kiwi birds, of course, have marrow in their bones, another of our flightless birds.
Gotcha. So they appear to have silky feathers. Can you comment on the texture of their feathers?
I've touched some feathers. So any feathers that are found on the island get given to the local Maori people, the local iwi or tribe, which in this area is Ngāi Tahu or Kai Tahu in their dialect. And those feathers are then used for traditional garments and cloaks and things like this of great prestige. And they smell kind of old leathery, and they are soft. I don't know if I would. I never got to touch a bird, touching the feathers, that they were soft. I don't know if I could call them silky, but yes, any feathers recovered are sacred and special and given to the Ngāi Tahu people there. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you. Was the fungus that you mentioned, was that located and removed? Did they find the source for that?
And it's a really abundant kind of almost atmospheric fungus. Like there's a whole lot of this stuff in the atmosphere and lots of strains. So I'm not sure if there was particular sort of sanitations of the nests that had it. I suspect there was. And there's been a lot of research since then into, hey, do we need to clean out Kākāpō bowls to prevent the buildup of bacteria? Because you don't leave them, right? So they're defecating and everything in their bowls going on from that process. They've tried cleaning them out and found that that doesn't really make a difference to their health. So I guess you need to build up some bacteria to build up some immunity and things like that. But a particular strain, and so the focus was more making sure we don't bring it in again or keep bringing it in, sterilizing your hands, sterilizing all the equipment you work with, and so forth. And it has been one of those things that I've got to be honest, I've kept an eye on, is hoping that there's no outbreaks of these diseases since I was down on the island. I didn't want to be the one that's causing it to come back. Yeah. When I was there in January and I haven't heard anything, I think I'm off the hook.
I guess so, huh? Um, so the trees, do they mast in the same year?
The trees will all mast kind of together, yeah, and it comes back from different climactic events. So I forget which way around it is, but it needs like a hot year followed by a cold year followed by a hot year, something like that. And the trees kind of get the idea, okay, this is a good year to mast together. Because if the trees individually masted at different times, then you wouldn't get that effect of a giant accumulation of food, right? So yeah, every say 4 or 5 years, they figure it out. And different species and in different regions, you might get masts in slightly different times a year. Our beech tree that covers most of the South Island is another masting tree. Sadly, the mast nowadays leads to extinction events, because when you increase the food source, that increases the population of things like the rats and stoats. They've got more food on the ground. And then when that food source is taken away of the fresh seed, then they look elsewhere for food. And that means they're looking at eggs and chicks and things. So controlling predators, controlling those introduced mammals is a really important part of our conservation.
Thank you. So how can scientists establish the approximate number of species there are?
The approximate number of species there are. So I don't know if I can answer how we know how many species in general there are, but if we're counting back and guessing how many birds there were, they're doing that by looking at the genome of the bird and looking at where it's come from, and they can deduce that this bird had one parent that we don't know about, plus another parent we do know about, so we know there was another adult bird, and then we can see that genetic path spreading throughout the family tree and tracking it back to give us an idea. And we've also got reports of estimates of the population. There's a bit of a famous story, and sorry, this is a bit gruesome near the end, but a famous story when they were building the Milford Road, the road down to Milford Sound that we consider the eighth wonder of the world. The men that were camping along that road, building that, ate Kākāpō on their way down. So we get these anecdotal stories to help us estimate the population of the Kākāpō previously. But I've seen estimates of 50,000 birds in New Zealand. I've seen other estimates that say 150,000 birds. So in short, we don't know how many there were.
Gotcha. Thank you for that thoughtful answer, Sam. So if I'm traveling down to New Zealand with Nat Hab, I know it's probably not likely that we're going to see the Kākāpō. Would you recommend any extensions or ways that I should stay around to see them?
Yeah, no, basically, you're not going to see a Kākāpō. They are on these 3 offshore islands. You're only allowed on those islands if you are part of those Kākāpō projects, and they only take volunteers when the mast years are on. There is this bird in the Dunedin Wildlife Hospital, but part of their operating and the size of their operation means you can't go and visit them at the moment. I will be the first to make sure that if you're ever allowed to visit Dunedin Wildlife Hospital as a that we will go and visit. We have worked closely with them in the past on our tours, so if the opportunity arises, we'll be all over it. Sinbad, the Kākāpō, who was hand-reared and took a liking to Mark Calverdine in the video, he used to be used for advocacy and travel around the country, but he's stopped doing that. Mountain up in the North Island, I mentioned there's 3 birds in there. I walked around Whenua Island for 14 days. And the population on Whenua is about 10 times denser. These are nocturnal, so they're coming out at night. They're incredibly well camouflaged. They hide up trees, they're in nests. 14 days, I saw one wanted to be found during the breeding season. So visiting Sanctuary Mountain and hoping to see a Kākāpō, unfortunately, the chances are just so low. It's not worth that being a purpose of your trip. It is up in the North Island near where our North Island extension runs through, but it's not part of the itinerary. You could perhaps have a look around this predator-free sanctuary independently if you wanted, but as I said, your probability of seeing one is incredibly low.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that, Sam. Unfortunately, that will be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'll throw it back to you for whatever closing comments you wish to share with us.
Oh, no. Well, thank you very much, Rob, and cheers, everyone, for taking some time to listen. It's wonderful to get to talk about something that I've been able to have a fabulous encounter with earlier in the year. And obviously, thanks to the Department of Conservation for letting me use some of their photos and letting me come to the island and see those animals, and appreciate everyone tuning in to learn a bit more about something, a very unique creature to New Zealand, and a very unique project that is considered now one of the most successful, one of the most incredible recovery projects of a species anywhere in the world. So wonderful to have you all to listen and learn. Thank you.
And thank you, Sam, for sharing this with us today. We really do appreciate it. And I would also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Thank you for staying on board over time. So if you are interested in information on how you could travel with NatHab to New Zealand, please give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on the website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. So long, my friends. We'll see you next time.